Hello humans, it's your host Kory, and before we jump into this week's episode, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, A Well Cared For Human, is now available on pre-order. Depending on when you see this, it might already be available for purchase, but I wanted you to know that the book was out into the world for you. If you've been loving what we've been talking about on the podcast, please check out the book, not only because it's nicely well organized and packaged. The episodes are episodic, and so it's kind of all over the place, different topics for different weeks as they come to me, but the book is nice and organized by section and chapter, and really gives you a better overview of what it's like to have an amazing relationship with yourself. But more importantly, I don't know about you, but when I read self-help books, I like to have something tangible that I can highlight or circle or dog ear and keep coming back to, keep referencing, and so that's why it was really important for me to make this book for you. I wanted you to have something in your hands that you could keep coming back to again and again as you needed. And so please check it out if that's something that you're interested in, and you'll find the links to all of that in my description box below, but you'll also be able to go to my website, awellcaredforhuman.com, and check out the links there as well. But let's jump into this week's episode. Welcome to A Well Cared For Human, the podcast that tries to convince you that you are 100% normal and an even better than okay example of the human species, despite the fact that sometimes we feel like the craziest, most incapable, or worthless creatures on the face of this planet. I'm Kory, an author, a creative, and the host of the show. Whatever you're bringing to the table today, I hope this episode proves to be a dose of inspiration for you on your quest to become a well-cared-for human. You can find the episode show notes, your free wellness blueprint, and more at awellcaredforhuman.com. And as always, thank you for listening. Hello humans, it's your host Kory, and this week we're going to talk about sleep hygiene. Now, this is a highly requested topic. I know many of us are not great sleepers, myself included. Right now I have a lot of summer allergies going on for some random reason. I was doing fine for most of the summer, and now all of a sudden I'm sneezing. And my sinuses are really puffy, and I just can't breathe very well at night, so I keep not sleeping well. But in general, I think that sleep is something that many of us struggle with, either because there are issues in our routines, or our minds are just way too busy to calm down, or there's these other little things that we're doing that keep us hyped up instead of winding down. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that, ways that we tend to sabotage ourselves and how it might be affecting our relationship with our bodies, how we navigate our days. And so let's look at that this week. And hopefully, if you're someone who's struggling with your sleep, by the end of this episode, you'll have at least a couple new things to try, because there's a lot of information on the internet out there. I'm sure if you looked up ways to improve your sleep hygiene, you would find things. So I don't know that I'm introducing anything particularly new or radical, but maybe there's something you haven't yet tried that you can give a shot by the end of this episode. And so first, let's talk a little bit about why sleep is so important. And I feel like we know why sleep is so important, most of us, because we feel so terrible when we don't get enough sleep. But there is this underlying assumption that we don't need it as much. At least we act like we don't need it because we continuously deprioritize our sleep. When we make decisions or we try to do other things, we just act like it's not really something that has to be prioritized, that I need to do this and this and this instead. And so we take it for granted how important our sleep is and how useful it can be to invest in that. And then there's so many aspects of our daily lives, especially the way that life is set up for most of us right now, that make it really hard to invest in sleep and to have good sleep hygiene and have good routines. And so for that reason as well, it can even be hard to decide what you're going to do about it, or how you're going to build a routine or a structure that does prioritize your sleep, because there's so many reasons not to do it. So I think that there's this setup just right there at the beginning of natural inclination to not invest in it very well, to deprioritize it, to think that it's not that important, to take it for granted, essentially. And then also that our culture, especially in Western cultures, but I'm sure maybe these are issues in other cultures as well. I'm thinking specifically of Japanese culture that's very work-centric. Sleep is not really emphasized there as well. It's more emphasis on work and the things that need to be done. And so in these other cultures, East, West, wherever, in which we just don't value sleep the way we should, and we are given so many reasons not to invest in it. So how do we set ourselves up for success if we have this natural inclination to not prioritize it, to not value it, and we have social pressure to keep our bad habits in place? How in the world do we get past those two big hurdles right off the bat? Well, I think that it's going to come down to first deciding for yourself that sleep does matter, that you need it, that you think you feel better when you have it. Because if you can't decide in your mind whether or not you actually need it, it's going to be hard to convince yourself to make these changes to have better sleep. And so do you yourself right now value the sleep that you get? And if the answer is yes, absolutely, but I just can't seem to make time for it, then we can start looking more at the habit things. But I definitely believe that it starts with a mindset issue of, do you think sleep is really important? Do you think that it's in your hands, that you can decide how much sleep that you get? And I'm imagining right now, I have many friends who have kids. I'm imagining them looking at me when I say, well, what do you want to do about your sleep? Don't you know it's in your hands? And I'm sure they want to reach out and slap me. Like, are you kidding me? My children don't let me sleep. And so even if your life has very difficult circumstances that make sleeping hard, let's just keep going, and hopefully you'll still find something that will be of value to you. So beyond the mindset issue, first deciding that you're going to take care of your sleep issues, like you're going to value the sleep that you get, that you're going to start viewing it as something important to do. Once you get past that you do any kind of work you need to. And mindset issues are kind of tricky because it's not a one-fits-all solution. Like, you have to figure out what it is for you specifically that's giving you that hang up. So for example, if I have any mindset issue, not just around good habits like sleeping, but anything where I feel stuck in my mind, where I know maybe I should be acting a different way or I should be thinking about something differently, but it's just not shifting for me, I'm still kind of stuck in my current pattern, I usually need to do something a bit more intensive, like look at either some contemplation, reflection, maybe some journaling, look at, why do I not care about my sleep as much as I should? Or why do I not think that it's important to prioritize? Why do I think that these other things are more important? And really start looking at that to see what my sticking points are. Like, what am I getting hung up on? What am I fixating on? Like, if I'm telling myself that, it's more important for me to get more work done in a day, why do I value work more than sleep? Like, why do I think that work is more important than sleep? And it's like, well, because my self-worth is tied to my work. Like, I'm an unworthy person if I'm not getting enough work done in the day. Is it something like that that's got me hung up on my habits? And so I have to look at that a little bit more closely and figure out what's going on with me on an internal level. And sometimes we can't just answer it right off the top of our head. Sometimes we have to do a bit of digging. But once we get past the mindset issues, then it's practicalities. Like, what is happening in your day that's keeping you stuck? And so things that I would look at in the course of my day to figure out why my hygiene is bad is body, mind, and then spirit. Body, mind, spirit. And so spirit, it's not like necessarily woo-woo out in the world. I'll get more specific with it in a second. But starting with body, is there anything going on in my body that's making it hard to sleep? So for example, when I was at my worst with my back pain, I really struggled to sleep. It was a physical issue, so I wasn't very comfortable at night when I was sleeping, and so I didn't look forward to it. I didn't want to go lay down in bed. Like, my pain was a little bit worse when I was just even stretched out in certain ways, and so there was a physical element that made sleeping hard. And so thinking about how could I address the physical issues, in my case, I had to get and this feels silly and intensive. I had to get a bunch of different kinds of pillows. So right now I actually sleep with like a pregnancy pillow situation. So it's like soft on one side with like a little compression thing that goes between your legs, and it wraps around my neck and down the other side, and it's pushed up against my back. And I have to ask my wife, I'm like, push on the other side, like scoot all the way up against it with your back so that it stays in place, because I have this tendency to roll over onto my back when I sleep. But when I sleep on my back, like my low back pain is absolutely terrible in the morning. And I think it's because when you're stretched along, there's this natural like little curvature in your back, and my vertebrae did not like to be like that for any extended period of time. And so I can't sleep on my back, even though that is naturally what I do. When I go to sleep, I roll onto my back. And so I've had to play with pillows, and it wasn't just the pregnancy pillow. I had a couple pillows before that I was trying to configure in a way that would make me sleep better, but that didn't really work out. I had to look at my back medication, and so I used to take baclofen for probably about 2 years. I was taking it at night. I would take one at night, and then I would lay down and go to sleep, and I felt that that was helping me fall asleep because it makes you a little sleepy. But then I didn't really notice an improvement in the back pain, and so that was interrupting as well. So are you on any medications that might be affecting your sleep in a negative way? Or do you need to add any medications? So my wife really likes to take melatonin gummies before she goes to sleep, and so that helps her fall asleep much more easily. So looking at these body issues that might be interrupting the sleep. So do you have a comfortable sleep space? Is it the right temperature? So I can't sleep in a hot environment. Everyone gets sweaty, but I get really uncomfortable, and especially now that I'm like boxed in with all these pillows in a certain way to keep me in a certain position. So if I get hot at night, I can't sleep well. So is your room the right temperature? Is the actual space that you're sleeping in, is it dark enough? Because if I see a sliver of light around my curtains or anything, I'll wake up and I can't stay asleep. So light, temperature, comfort, or have all of these things been addressed? If they haven't been addressed, is there anything that you can do to make it better? And this is always dependent upon our income situation, of course, like if we don't have a ton of money, but you can get a blanket from the thrift store and you can, I was going to say nail it, but maybe don't punch holes in your wall if you don't need to, but put it over the window somehow. Think about things that you could do to make your space more physically comfortable if it's a physical issue that's making it hard for you to sleep at night, because that's definitely going to interfere with your ability to sleep well if the physical aspects are not in place. And this is really hard, again, if you've got something like chronic pain or if you're sick. So, for example, I've had some friends with some longer term illnesses and their body just didn't feel great. It didn't really matter what they did to their space. It's just their body was always kind of a little bit achy. And so there might be something that you need to help you along, like melatonin, or maybe you can get your physician to prescribe you something to help with the pain or these other things. But all of that would be under the category of addressing physical concerns, physical issues that might be making it hard for you to sleep. Now, beyond physical issues, there's mental issues. And what I mean by mental issues is for many of us, which is where our minds are just still going, even though it's midnight, it's 1, it's 2 in the morning, our minds are completely active and they're just always computing. That's for me. That's me, at least. I don't know about you guys, but I have a very active mind. And so I have to start winding my mind down long before I actually want to sleep. I have to start doing quiet tasks just to exhaust her so she doesn't just keep me up at night. Because I'm a thinker. I'm a very imaginative person. I'm a very problem-solving oriented person, or just anxious person, Now would be a great time at 11:59 at night to think about all the things that could possibly go wrong in my life. Why not? And so there's that as well. The scrolling as well. So sometimes I like to scroll before bed, and I'm really trying to break myself of this habit because I don't think it's good for me. I don't think it's good for anybody, but I can only speak about myself. I don't think it's healthy to be scrolling right before bed, especially because of the light. And I can't remember what I read about this, but the light being a factor for keeping us up. It stimulates some part of the brain that's supposed to be quieting down at night, and so there might also be that aspect. I know someone who wears blue light glasses when they scroll in bed at night. I should probably try that myself. But what I'm usually looking for is an ASMR video or something soothing, but then I get distracted and I wander off, and now I'm looking at someone giving reviews of the things that they've eaten, which is not at all what I was looking for. And so I have to be a little bit more conscious about the things that I choose to wind me down. But my brain does get very calm if I can watch something like an ASMR video. I love these ones recently where they're basically just turning pages. And so the ASMR video is super simple. It's like a beautiful book and someone's hands, just their pretty hands, and they're just they're kind of guiding their fingers along the page, and then they turn the page, and then they smooth it out in the paper sounds that it makes. I find that really soothing, and so I drop off to sleep. You know, it'd probably be more soothing is if I actually read a book before bed. And then went that way. But I stopped reading before bed for a couple of reasons. One is because sometimes I would get really into it and then I'd stay up late because I couldn't close the book. But then also I would find that I would get distracted and it would actually like stimulate me more. And so, you know, the point is like pick something that you think will help your mind quiet down. I don't know what that would be. For someone with a super active mind, it can be really challenging. But some things that I've tried in the past that have brought me success, the reason why I don't do some of these now is a matter of discipline. It's not because the techniques aren't effective. It's because I'm not disciplined enough to do them all the time. But things that did work for me is meditating before bed. Anything that forces me to kind of sit with myself, let my mind wear itself out, kind of get everything out that it needs to. I've also had a lot of great success with journaling before bed. And so essentially what I think of as a great journaling technique before bed is what I would call like a mind dump. I don't have an official term for this because I haven't tried to describe this to many people before. But this idea of I just let my mind write everything out that it's worried about. So if you have a very active mind, for example, and it's got this tendency to, when you're trying to fall asleep, go through all the problems that you have for that day or the next day, or you're just still stuck in that very active mode, it might be really effective for you to write out like everything that you're worried about, what you think you might try to do about that tomorrow. Just get it all out of your head and onto the page. And that has been really effective for me to get some of that off of my brain, out of my head and onto the page. It was much easier for me to relax and go to sleep when I felt like I had done the thinking already. I needed to do this a little bit before I actually wanted to go to sleep. So for example, if my goal was to fall asleep by midnight, don't start this activity at 11:45. You know, it might take me 30 minutes or 45 minutes to actually do all the journaling. And so giving myself enough of a lead time to actually wear myself out mentally to do that as well. I've also found some, in addition to the journaling, some success with other calming techniques. So like doing like a nice little puzzle or doing something that's mentally stimulating but in a very gentle way. Music has been a nice one too, like soft music, not something that I would have listened to in the club or for a workout or anything that would like get my heart pumping and get me excited or generate a lot of emotions. Nothing like that. Just really soothing, almost boring stuff, to be honest. So pick something that's especially boring and do that right before you want to go to bed, because nothing's going to put you to sleep quicker than if you bore yourself to death, right? And so thinking about that, boring stuff, music, journaling, the objective here is just to do something that will wear your mind out. If it's got a lot of activity and it's got a lot of tension in there, figuring out what's going to help it release that essentially before you go to sleep would be really effective in helping the mind to wind down. And then contrarily, avoiding any of the stuff that hypes you up, you know. So if you are someone who, for example, I'm a very visual person, I can't watch really visually stimulating things before bed. So these ASMR videos are usually pretty calm, pretty simplistic. Like I said, she's just like turning the pages of a book. There's nothing cinematic here. But if I was to play Cyberpunk, for example, right before bed, and I'm running around shooting and like looting 30 minutes before bed, my mind would be so hyped up. And I'm sure that when I closed my eyes, I would just see scenes of like my character V hopping around, like grabbing things. And so I'm a very visual person. So anything visually stimulating, I can't really do a few hours leading up to bed. Anything very emotionally stimulating is kind of why I had this hit and miss relationship with the reading. I used to really love watching webtoons. Reading webtoons. I don't know if you're familiar with the webcomic app, but there's a lot of great stories on there. And so I'd find a new webtoon and I'd start reading it, and then I look over it, it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, why am I still reading? So reading, the emotional stimulation part, the imaginative stimulation part's a little tricky for me. But anyway, avoiding overstimulating things, whether that's visually, emotionally, physically as well. So I can't have sugar or caffeine too late in the day. They hype me up, I get too excited, and I also have crazy dreams when I've had too much sugar. I don't know if that's true for you guys. You could tell me in the comments of the show, but when the sugar intake is high and it's late in the day, my dreams are wild. They're very vivid and they're almost kind of feverish, like they don't make sense. And so I know if I've had too much sugar or too close to bed, because that's the experience that I'll have. But thinking about that, any kind of stimulation, and then how am I going to wind down, but also how am I going to avoid stimulation? Those are the two layers for managing my mind mentally before I go to sleep. Now, spiritually, what I meant by that is, what is my mood like when I go to sleep? So if I'm really anxious, part of that might be because I'm working too hard, I'm not playing enough. When I talk about the spirit, I'm referring to it in the context of how I talk about the 4 pillars. So there's the mind and emotions pillar, there's the body pillar, spirit, and then connections with others. And so spirit is purpose, joy, play, anything that has that buoyant feeling. And so sometimes if I've had a really hard day in which I don't want to say overstimulated, but if I am overworked, if the day was just too much of an adult day, let's say it like that, if the day was too hard, or I was really disappointed, or something happened to deflate my spirit, right? I didn't get to play enough, I didn't connect with joy enough, I had to do too many hard adult things, whatever that is, then when I go to sleep, I might be, I don't want to say really sad, but it's because it's not just necessarily a sad situation, but just, down. Like you might go to sleep and you're down. And it can be really hard to sleep when you're feeling that way, to feel like you got something out of the day. And so I think that triggers, for me anyway, that triggers this, what I call kind of revenge scrolling, which is where I want to get something positive out of the day. Like I want to get some good experience, and so I'm just looking for video after video after video, but we all know that the algorithm betrays us and often does not serve us exactly what we need when we need it. I just watch a bunch of content that's no good for me whatsoever, and so it kind of triggers these bad behaviors of trying to recover my time or recover the day that doesn't actually nourish me in any kind of meaningful way. And so something that I've tried in the past, and I'm actually going to try it again soon, because I haven't done this in a minute. Fortunately, I don't have too many soul-sucking days lately, but I've had many in the past. And what I try to do to kind of lift that mood and also fill that time more productively rather than falling into this scrolling slump is to do something like color or draw, something pleasant but really simple. Again, avoiding that overstimulation before bed. So when I was really stressed, I had one of those, the coloring books that's like you get out your color pencils and you color in the different scenes, and it's supposed to be like a winding down technique. So something like that, where you're doing something tactile, which can be very soothing. You're doing something visually appealing. It's pleasant. It's joyful, if that's the kind of thing that gives you happiness. But it's not something that will actually excite you or get you so turned up, so to speak, that you can't go to sleep. And so looking for something like that that's joyful, but in a quiet, calm way to help you kind of recover that feeling rather than just getting on the phone and watching a bunch of videos and getting kind of lost in the, I don't want to say chaos of the internet, but that's kind of what it is, right? It's just like this current, this river of content that you just get swept away with. And it doesn't actually make those feelings go away. So if I'm scrolling or looking for videos or something to make me feel better, I don't actually ever feel more rested or happier when that's done. I just feel like more of my energy has been sucked away from me. And so this might be a more useful way to address those feelings. And then, of course, doing things leading up to bed. So having a great routine can get you in the mindset of sleep as well. So for me, what I've tried to do recently, and this has changed a lot since I've gotten Max. So we have a new dog, Max. If you haven't been following the podcast each week, we adopted him on June 1st, and I'm recording this at the end of July. So it's almost 2 months that we've had Max, and he's really changed my schedule up because he is up in the morning. I have a dog that gets up now. Before Max, if you're a long-time follower, so before Max, I had this potato dog. It was a pug, an elderly pug, and pug who eventually lost his mobility, so he truly was a potato. And he did not want to get up early. He didn't want to do anything. He was just not an active dog. And so it was really easy to sleep in or to get more sleep. That's not the case with Max. Max is young. He's very mobile. He's very active. He wants to get up and do things right away. He's excited as soon as he wakes up in the morning. And so I don't get to sleep in anymore, essentially. I have to get up, which means I've also had to train myself to be more conscientious about going to bed. Because in the past, with the potato dog, for example, if I stayed up late, it wasn't a big deal because I work for myself and I do my own projects. I control my own schedule. So I could have just stayed in bed and slept longer. And so that would have easily balanced itself out. But because now I have an earlier set wake time, I have to be much more self-disciplined about when I go to sleep if I'm going to get that full window, take advantage of that full window. And it's been really rocky for me. I'll be completely honest, full disclosure, for like the last 7-8 weeks, it's been challenging because I've gotten up on time, but I'm not always able to wind down quite as easily. So the things that I've done more recently that have helped me iron out some details is having a nighttime routine that does all the things that we've already talked about. So not too stimulating, starts winding me down, gets everything out off my mind if I can ahead of time. So what I'll do is around 7:45, I have an alarm on my phone that goes off that actually warns me it's like time to start getting ready for bed. And I'm like, okay, so I need to stop working. I need to feed Max. I need to take him on his evening walk. And so I start doing my evening things then when this alarm goes off. And I need the alarm because I have no concept of time. Like I just don't pay attention to the time during the day. And so I have this alarm that triggers that reminds me. And it's important for me not to snooze it because then I will just go back into the flow state of the working or the doing things. And so I will get lost in that again. So paying attention to the alarm, that's my first step. And then after that, there's the walking. There's going ahead and doing my nighttime routine before I get too sleepy. So another thing is that I would stumble up the stairs at midnight, and then I would need to do my skincare or wash my face or brush my teeth or floss, whatever it is that I wanted to do before bed. But I'd be so tired, and so I'd get kind of lazy and neglectful of those things. And so when I started doing it earlier, like pretty much after dinner, when I know I wasn't going to eat anything else or I wasn't going to go anywhere else, like I take everything off, I'm going to get any more sun, there's no more need for sunscreen, right? Any of those things, if I do it earlier, even if it was like 9 for me, I know some of you who actually go to bed at 9, good for you. You're probably not listening to this episode if you're that person. So probably just us late night owls who can't sleep here. But the idea that doing it earlier was like, oh, this is so much easier, because then when I did finally go up to sleep at like 11 or 11:30, I didn't have to worry about doing all that. I could just take out my contacts and go to bed. And so it was much easier of a lift for me, like to do the things than here's my 20-30 minutes of getting ready for bed, but I'm so tired now and I don't really want to do it. So moving the nighttime routine forward, the actual order, to give you just a better picture of this, is so the alarm would go off, I would feed Max, I would take him on his walk, I would start, when we get back, I'd start getting ready for bed, then I would do yoga, so that's to quiet me physically if the walk didn't do it, and also because I have the back issues, just stretching after longer walks are good for me, period. Then I can start doing wind down tasks like reading a book, not on my phone, something nice and boring, reading the book, or playing with Max, or just something that is calm. Playing with Max, you would think that that'd be physically stimulating, but it actually wears me out, so I'm fine with that. But basically winding down for both of us, him and me, and just doing those really boring, simple tasks leading up to bed. And now, also because I have begun to associate this routine with we're getting ready for bed, my body is starting to respond accordingly. My big sticking point so far has been to, when I get into the bed, to not pick up my phone and start looking at things or scrolling things. Or if I'm like, I'm just going to pick an ASMR video, just pick the ASMR video. Don't get distracted and like look at the other stuff. And that's really hard because let's say I'll go to YouTube, for example. It already shows you like all the different shorts or things that you can choose from. And immediately I'm seeing things that are interesting. So my mind is like, oh, maybe I should. So I have to be really conscientious and like really draw on my self-control to not do that. But it's a challenge. And so at the end of the day, I think that whatever you do, just give yourself a break. Like if you're trying your best, don't give yourself a hard time about it. If you're falling short of your sleep goals, or you don't have this great sleep routine, or you can't turn off your mind as easily as you would like to, that's no excuse to beat yourself up, give yourself a hard time. Just know that there are many of these factors that you can look at, that you can play with, just trying to make it as easy on yourself as possible, but just keeping in mind of like, which of these do you think is probably making it hard for you to fall asleep? Is it that your body is not getting worn out enough, or it's not comfortable enough to actually sleep? Is it your mind? Is your mind way too active? Is it too racing? Are you too anxious? Or emotionally, is that what's keeping you up? Or is it like spirit, like you feel like your day was so joyless, so sad that you just can't imagine ending it the way that you did, and so you want to do some of this revenge scrolling to try to get something joyful out of the day, something for yourself? Like, which of these do you feel is probably impacting your ability to get good sleep? And can you build a routine in the evening that addresses those issues, whatever they may be, to help you kind of wind down and get into the mood better? And so just looking at that might be of great help to you. And so that's it for today, dear humans. I really hope you found this episode useful. Again, these are just my tips on sleep hygiene. If you have some great tips that have been really helpful to you, please share those with us in the comments. I'm sure that everybody would like more tips on how to sleep well in a very loud and chaotic world. I know that I'm always open for more great ideas, so please share those with us if you have them. Otherwise, I will be back next week with another episode of A Well Cared For Human, and until then, please take good care of you. This episode of A Well Cared For Human was written and produced by me, Kory Marie. The music was by Late Night Feeler and Esther Abrami. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider visiting my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get early ad-free access to the episodes, as well as a monthly patrons-only Q&A, bonus videos, and more. Not to mention that your Patreon support lets me know that you find value in the show and want it to continue. You can find me on Patreon by visiting www.patreon.com/Kory Marie. If you can't support the show financially, that is okay. You can still subscribe to the show, leave a review of the show, and recommend the show to your friends, not just the neurotic ones. All of this helps so much. And as always, thank you for listening.